I was wandering through the job fair. Dozens upon dozens of stalls were all ready to view. Each stall had people just wandering around them. People in suits or dresses, interviewing people in casual dress, all looking for jobs. It always brought a smile to my face. Seeing a nervous man dressed in a suit and tie interviewing a much, much larger man with a red beard and a dolphin tattoo for a henchman job. As I was walking by, I could hear the man in the suit listing the benefits of the job to the man with the dolphin tattoo. We offer competitive pay, full medical benefits, starting sick pay of 24 hours a year, overtime and vacation time, a travel stipend, pay evaluation every 6 months, and you'll get to work for certified hero Siegfried. He continued listing off all the benefits. Looking back and listening in, I noticed a very important detail that the suit was forgetting to mention. So, I spoke up, interrupting this clearly interested hulk of a man. What is your turnover rate, and what's your mortality rate? By law, you're required to post those and explain it to anyone who asks, I say. The man in a suit gulped and then sighed, pulling out a laminated piece of paper with the mortality and turnover rates. The mortality rate was a whopping 46%. The turnover rate, 83%. I let out a snort when I saw those numbers. The man with the dolphin tattoo also let out a hearty chuckle when he saw those numbers. A 46% mortality rate, that meant in 6 months, if this man had 100 people working for them, 46 would be dead. The 83% turnover rate meant that the 54 that survived, 45 would have left to find a different job. So, at the end of the 90 days, out of 100 people hired, only 9 of the original would have remained. Yeah, this wasn't a place I was going to apply for. The man with the beard and the dolphin tattoo, also clearly valuing his life and his time, turned away from the suit. Muttering under his breath, the man in the suit turned to me and eyed me up and down. I was dressed in short sleeves, with a gray shirt, a black skirt, and rose tattoos from my arms stretching up to my neck. He was judging me, and was trying to figure out if I was even worth offering a job. I turned away from him, giving him a rude gesture, and hearing him swear under his breath. Clearly, with such a high turnover and high mortality, they were desperate to get any warm bodies they could. However, it was very unlikely that this booth was going to fix that problem for them. Continuing my walk, I saw more and more booths. Some, like the Vanguard, were emergency workers. They were boasting loudly both by their posters and their voices. They were boasting a mortality rate of nearly 0%. However, they still had such a high turnover rate due to the high rate of disasters and relatively low pay. Sure, the benefits were there, but it didn't appeal to me much. I had student loans to pay for, after all. Next to the 5 different booths for emergency Vanguard workers, they were always hiring in this world of super beings, there was a man in a tan suit who stood 8 feet tall, and he had a pair of white wings behind him. According to his booth, they were hiring people to work for the Cathedral of Io. Something about incense burners and people to carry the books. The man with the wings was playing the whole angel thing really hard, oftentimes spreading his own wings to try and look more majestic. However, the actually black-suited acolytes next to him kept glancing at him with hate in their eyes as they worked, doing everything at the actual stall, while the man with wings spoke in a deep voice. Most people just walked past him, not even looking in his direction. As anyone will tell you when working with a religious extremist, never look them in the eye, even when you're walking by. Even in this day and age, very few people wanted to work for the church, even one as powerful and rich as the Io Church. Nonetheless, I still hung back in the walkway and read the posters and listened to his words, trying to filter something useful out of all the hot air he was boasting. 3% mortality rate, and a turnover rate of 0% according to the posters. That was already a bit suspicious. In statistics, any measurement that was too high or too low, it was there for a reason. No turnover at all in a 5-year period and then averaged into a 3-month period is about as suspicious as someone handing out $1,000 bills to the homeless. We have a low mortality rate and an even lower turnover rate. Join us in helping the Point Effect spread peace and the word of Io to the world. You can get paid doing the right thing. We care about you. And we are looking for people that are motivated by more than money. Anyone who believes in Io is welcome. But if you are only in it for doing another job, you would have better luck being a minion elsewhere, the wingman boasted. His name tag, now that it was finally close enough, had his name listed as Angelo. Because, of course, a man with wings would be called Angelo. So, I approached him and decided to question him some. Who knows, maybe this will turn out interesting enough to at least interview with him. When I got within 5 feet of him, his gray eyes focused on me. When I met his eyes, I stared back, careful not to reveal anything to him. His eyes seemed to flash with an internal light, and then he lifted up his clipboard that had the application on it. Angelo smiled at me with his teeth showing, and now much closer, it looked like he had too many teeth, and somehow that was a bit unnerving. I briefly glanced over the requirements in front of me. Be able to lift 150 pounds for about an hour at a time, be able to stand for long periods of time, be able to resist demonic possessions, knowledge of the Latin language or be able to pick up Latin is a must. Preference would be placed on candidates who would be able to speak multiple languages. Trainings in exorcisms, weapons, tactical response scenarios, emergency first aid, and candle making would all also have preferential treatment. Pay was 9 centi an hour. So far, a pretty standard application and requirements. Most jobs required lifting 150 pounds and standing for long periods of time. Both at the same time was a little rarer though. Emergency first aid and exorcisms was something we went over back in Adulting 101. The pay was technically below minimum wage for Garden City, but that's normal for someone working for the church or the military. Both are exempt from local minimum wage laws. I still continued reading the clipboard, trying to see just how bad this job actually was. And then, like it always turns out, the devil is in the details. Way down on the bottom, in fine print, was the requirement of the signing of a non-disclosure agreement, and the agreement that anyone who worked for the Cathedral of Io would not be allowed to work elsewhere after termination of employment for a period of no less than 10 years. Yeah, no wonder they had such a low turnover rate. They were trying to get people to sign to not work up for anyone else. This was extreme. Technically legal, but definitely extreme. I definitely didn't want to be stuck working for the church for the rest of my life. I just graduated trade school. Returning the clipboard back to Angelo, I gave my best customer service smile to him. The angel with the too many teeth. His eyes flashed again when I handed him back his clipboard and pen. He clearly was thinking I was an easy mark. Just write down my information, then he could give me a call and have a permanent minion for the church. And he could keep being a good little angel collecting souls for his God. Oh, I appreciate the offer, but I think I wouldn't be a good fit for the Church of Io. I think I will keep looking around for a better fit. Angelo nodded his head with the words, and then he tried to show me a tablet that was already playing a video about the benefits of working for the cathedral. The screen showed happy images of clouds and stock photos of people standing together laughing. Suspiciously, all the people in the stock photos were white men, as the narrator was discussing the diversity of the modern cathedral. I tried to take a step back, but his right hand was in front of me holding the tablets, and he continued to stand behind me, his wing blocking the way out to the left. So, he wasn't going to let me leave easily. I was already upset at him before, and now he wasn't letting me leave. Now, I was angry. I want to go. I don't want to apply for this job, I say practically with a hiss. His gray eyes now flashed with a deep violet gray. Interesting. Maybe the eye flashes were tuned to his emotional state? Now, when he spoke, and I could see that he did indeed have too many teeth. Angelo had rows upon rows of teeth in his mouth, like a shark. It even went down his tongue and through his throat. Why don't you give it a chance? The church is a good place to work, and I am a nice guy for giving you a chance to work for IO. He was trying to get me to smile and nod and just be a good girl and give him a chance. Obviously, he had to be a nice guy because he had feathery wings, a white smile, and he called himself a nice guy. Oh, obviously, he had to be a nice guy, knowing what I wanted even when I insisted I didn't want it. Oh, how lucky to have such a hero at a job fair, working to hire lost souls like me. Okay, yeah, I was laying the sarcasm a little thick, but it needed to be thick. So, I grabbed the tablet, causing the tablet's screen to go out. A small buzz was heard from the back of it, and a spark flew from the tablet onto Angelo's hands. Wincing and dropping the device onto the ground, he began to apologize. While he was leaning down to pick it up, I rudely pushed past his wings. He looked up at me while collecting the tablet. I don't know what happened. Maybe there was a short in the tablet. There's a few other tablets on the table. Maybe I can show you the video on one of those, he said, trying to save what face he could. However, already I wandered over to the tablets. Touching my fingers on each of the screens like I was tapping on something, each screen buzzed and a spark could be heard as they each went black. Oh, I am so sorry. Looks like these are broken also. I guess you cannot show me anything, I say as I bluntly walk away. I have a low-tier special ability. I can fry any electronics that I touch. Luckily, I can choose when to use it or not. However, when I do turn it on, it affects all electronics I'm touching, so I have to be careful when I do use it. Finally, far from Angelo's table and away from his complaining about the cheap tablets, now I'm back at the booths. I'm far from the main drag now, and now I'm at the booths that serve candy and other random freebies to get attention. Most of these jobs were pretty bland and essentially just the same job with different companies. Basic henchman jobs that were nearly identical to administrative duties. Boring, but essential to every bureaucracy, good, evil, and everything in between. I took a lollipop from one of the booths and listened to a woman in a tan suit and a blue wheelchair talk about the benefits of being a henchman for Mach V, a musical supervillain group. Honestly, the pay was good, and the duties asked were not bad. Basically, they wanted someone to act as both a social media representative, to explain what was going to happen before it happened, to let the civilians know where the impromptu concert was going to happen, and also someone to act as a researcher, someone to figure out the best place to have an impromptu concert/bank robbery. So, I filled out the application with her, and the nice woman took it and smiled. The job felt like it could work if nothing else turned out the way it was supposed to.
We are going to give you a call in about 24 hours, and then we can set up an interview with Mach V. If you accept the interview, it is expected to last half an hour, and you will be compensated for an equivalent of 2 hours of pay, regardless of if you are hired or not. If you decide not to do the interview, you will not be compensated. Do you have any questions?
The woman asked me. I shook my head and offered my hand out for a handshake. She took it and smiled for me. She had a nice firm handshake and had to reach up some from her chair to reach my hand. I then decided it would be best to get her name also, since she seemed like a really awesome person to get to know. I didn't catch your name. I am so sorry. I forgot to ask that earlier, I told her. The woman smiled again, and then she whispered,
I am Mach 5. You were interviewing to be a part of my team.
Now, all of a sudden it made a lot more sense. I nod and I tell her, I look forward to hearing from you. I tell her as I travel and check out even more booths. Nothing else really stuck out much. Everything else kind of blurred together. The most interesting thing was a booth for search and slaughter. I just thought it was interesting that they only had a 1% mortality rate and offered medical care. I spoke with the man in the booth. He had a classic monocle and a series of doctor's instruments in his right breast pocket. Shaking his latex hand, I spoke with him about working for Search and Slaughter. Turns out the surgeon likes dressing up his henchmen and minions like doctors. Most of them were not actually doctors, but it functioned as a uniform. Hence why the man in the booth was dressed the way he was. It certainly seemed interesting, but then I saw some of the Search and Slaughter's projects, and I handed back both the bloody portfolio and the clipboard to the man. Yeah, I'm good. I just don't think I'll be great at creating cyborgs and cybernetics, and I'm really not comfortable around blood. But thank you for the offer, I say. The pictures were full of henchmen and volunteers with cybernetics in various degrees of surgery and armament. They weren't too bloody, but Search and Slaughter was one of the most famous villains for creating enhanced humans and cyborgs. And I definitely wasn't interested in having parts of my body replaced with artificial body parts. I don't even know if I could with how my powers worked. But the man in the booth nodded, and he gave me a business card. It had his name on it, Nurse Nathaniel Nakes. It had an 11-digit phone number and an email address that I was pretty sure was shielded. He then shrugged and said, Well, you don't need to call me to join, but if you ever need my services or some help from Search and Slaughter, it certainly doesn't hurt to have friends on the other side, Nathan told me. Thanking him for his card, I gave him one of my own business cards. Another lesson from Adulting 101. Carry a business card when applying for jobs. He nodded and tucked it away. Wishing him luck, I went home for the day. Playing games in my apartment and enjoying my alone time, I relaxed for the night and showered, getting ready for my interview. Freshly cleaned, I combed my hair and practiced my best interview smile. There were dozens of possible places that the interview could take place, and I would have to try and make myself look presentable. Finally satisfied with my smile, I got an early rest and woke up from a dreamless sleep. Checking my phone, I already saw that I had a text. Thinking it was odd, I saw that it was offered several locations to meet. Checking my GPS, I saw that there was one fairly close by, and it looked like a bar. Shrugging, I read all the directions of the text. Select one of the locations for the interview. When you have found one that works, give us a call at XXXX XXX XXXY extension 5. The available times for the interview are between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Find a time that works best for you and let us know. Please show up at least 5 minutes early with something to write with and something to take notes in. Seemingly easy enough, I called the number and selected option 5. After a few minutes, I was connected to a familiar voice from yesterday.
Hello, this is Mach 5 of the band Mach 5. How can I help you?
She answered in a professional voice. Taken aback for a moment, I responded. Hi, this is Rosen Ashes. We spoke yesterday. I just wanted to set up an interview for the minion position with Mach 5. The text told me to set up a location with you. Is the bar Rainbow Rage an okay location to go to? I think 10 a.m. works best for me. I'm nervous, even though I just spoke with her yesterday. Every answer had to be thought out, and I didn't want to slip up and lose the job because I confused reward and award.
Yeah, sure. That sounds like fun. The bar opens direct at 10 a.m., so we will be there at around 10:05 or 10:10 a.m. Please don't drink anything alcoholic when you get there. But yeah, talk to the hostess and politely ask for a reservation under Mach 5. The interview will last about 30 minutes and you will be meeting me and the others. What else? Oh yeah, the dress is casual. Like walking around casual, but do not try to wear clean clothes and be clean yourself. You'll probably be fine, but we have to mention that for good reason,
She said with a small laugh. The laugh showed that it was an actual incident that happened.
But yeah, don't forget something to write with and something to take notes in. Preferably something analog like a notebook, but we won't say no to an electronic device. Do you have any questions for me?
She finished. Thinking about it for a moment, I decided to ask. How many of you are going to be there? I know the band Mach 5 has 4 members, but I also hear there are 5 members, but the 5th doesn't show up on stage. I'm sorry if you get that question all the time, but I do want to know how many people to expect. I asked, hoping I didn't offend her.
We do have 5 members. 4 of them are regulars on the band, and the 5th is like our medic. We have me, Mach 5 on the vocals. Troublemaker is on the bass, and he will probably be wearing a leather jacket with a treble clef on it. Shaker is on the drums. She is going to be wearing a blue bandana over her mouth. There will also be Volt Coil. He has a spiky hair and will be wearing metal spikes on a leather jacket. Our final member is Esclepsius. They're going to be wearing goggles and a green polo shirt. I should also let you know Esclepsius is deaf, so they will be staring at your face to understand your lips, so please don't be upset by their staring.
I nod and make a note of all that she was saying. So far, it seemed like it would certainly be an interesting group to be meeting. Having no more questions, I responded. Okay, I will see you around 10:10 at the Rainbow Rage bar. I cannot wait to see all of you later. I said, and then I heard Mach 5 giggle and then hang up. Shrugging, not sure what was so funny, I put my phone into my pocket and then began to get my duster on. Dressed in my blue hijab from yesterday and a green shirt with a matching skirt, I walked outside and followed the streets of Garden City. The temperature was always humid and warm, and despite the name of the city, there wasn't much of a garden outside. Outside the city, there were wetlands that went on for miles. Still, walking under the small trees planted by the city, the streets were still not busy, because it was an early Sunday. As I walk through the streets, I see a cat running across and chasing a mouse. Glancing at the cat chasing the mouse, I expect the cat to catch it. Instead, I watch the mouse run up into a pipe, and the cat futilely try to reach into the pipe, coming up empty-pawed. Smiling for the mouse, I made it to the bar Rainbow Rage, right as it was opening. Stepping in, I show my ID, and I'm let in. The hostess was at our podium and just setting things up. She looked up at me and smiled briefly. I'll be with you in just a minute. My systems are just booting up. You're free to sit down at the bar if you want, she said as she kept tapping her tablet, trying to get it to function properly. I nod and stand a little off to the side. No problem. I think I'm under the reservation Mach 5, so if it's alright, I will just stand here until the system is ready. I say, smiling back with what I hope is a winning smile. The hostess looked up at me with big eyes. Your reservation for Mach 5? Oh, in that case, I don't need a tablet to find you your seat. Follow me, she said, turning around and leading me to one of the booths by the window. I am honestly surprised it wasn't some back room or some hidden corner of the bar. Everyone expects that from the movies and the books. I take a seat where I can see the door, and then the hostess then says, if you want anything to drink, just let us know. Mach 5 has it all taken care of. What would you like to drink? We have a large assortment of microbrews, some beautiful wines from around the world, and we even have some new aged whiskeys," the hostess said in her customer service voice. I remember what Mach 5 said earlier about not drinking any alcohol, and honestly, I didn't want to drink either, so this was an easy order to make. "Do you have any clear pop? I think I would like a glass of clear pop, if that is available." The hostess smiled again and almost seemed to be bouncing on her toes in excitement. Nodding, she went to the bar and immediately returned with the glass of clear pop. She beamed a smile at me and set it next to me. I lift the glass and take a sip. "Thank you for that. I think I'll just wait here until Mach 5 I'll get here," I say as the hostess goes back to her podium. I don't wait very long. First in the door was a very tall figure, dressed in black robes and black goggles. I could see their face underneath the goggles. It looked like it was coated in skeletal makeup, and with their goggles, it made it look like they didn't even have any eyes. The makeup made them look even thinner and taller than they actually were, and very difficult to identify. They approached me and did a kinda half-wave, half-salute. Recognizing the sign language greeting, I copied it the best I could. They sat at a chair in the bar and laid one foot flat on the ground, and the other dangled over the ground, the toe gently touching the floor. They kept staring at me like they were expecting me to say something, so I decided to speak. I haven't dealt with a lot of people who are deaf before, but I knew that yelling doesn't help, so I just spoke slowly, hoping my lips would be readable. "Hi, you must be Esclepsius. I'm Rosen," I say, offering my hand so they could shake it. They grab my hand, and their handshake is firm, and they pump my hand once. They give a wide smile. Their white teeth look strange underneath their lips, which were also made to look like a skeleton's grin. They lined up just perfectly. I smile back, and I compliment their amazing look. "You look really cool. I love your makeup. You look just like a Grim Reaper," I tell them. They tilt their head and they begin to sign again. First, the right hand rubbing against their heart, and then more signs too fast for me to follow. While trying to figure out what they were saying, I heard a different voice speak behind me. "Sorry, makeup? What makeup?" I turn around and I see a shorter man with spikes in his hair and also metal spikes on his leather jacket. He had electric blue eyeshadow and a yellow lightning bolt on his cheeks. I began to speak up, but he raised his hand and a slight static discharge could be felt off his gloved hand with the metal spikes. I'm just translating for Esclepsius. They're just joking. But yeah, they do look really cool in skeletal makeup. The undead look works best for them, and it also makes it harder for them to be recognized by facial recognition software. "But you must be Rosen Ashes. My name is Volt Coil," he said, offering his fingerless gloves to shake. Grabbing his hand, I shook it. His handshake wasn't as strong as Esclepsius, but there was a bit of static discharge. Not harmful, but certainly enough to notice. "What a cool name, Volt Coil. Is that a family name, or is it a stage name?" I asked, trying to strike up a conversation. It took him a moment to figure out the joke before he started laughing. I smiled to myself, glad I could make him laugh. Maybe this was all going to work after all. Coil is my family name, and it just so happens to fit, kind of like Tesla coil, except, Volt Coil, he said, touching his fingertips together, his palms facing me. Pulling his hands apart and down, there were lines of blue current between his two hands, with the smell of ozone and the buzzing of arcing electricity could be heard. The metal points of his gloves had blue electricity flow around the spikes, lighting up the area some before the current dissipated. The smell of ozone and the feeling of static had dissipated, and he smiled big and then shrugged. "Yeah, I know, but I like showing off, and it helps to have a guitar player that can make a light show while playing on the guitar. The electricity is carefully controlled to have a very, very high voltage and a very low current, so it can be seen and flow through people, but without harming anyone. Although my powers can be used in defensive or offensive ways, I do not do so because I don't want to, he said, his hands now resting on the table. The door opened again, and 2 more people came in. First was a familiar face in a familiar chair. Mach V was in a wheelchair with no hubs and also no handles on the back, with a line of spikes, interestingly enough. Her chair had a very modern look of shiny gray metal, and the chair also looked comfortable and motorized, allowing her to move forward with minimal difficulty. Approaching me at the end of the booth, she reached out and shook my hand. She also had a strong handshake, and her hands were warm, but a little calloused.
I hope you don't mind, but I can't stand for you,
she said with a smile on her face. I giggle at her joke, and the person behind her also smiles. He is shorter than Esclepsius, but taller than Voltcoil. He had a leather jacket with a bright red treble clef over his left breast pocket, and also his left arm was a piece of heavily engineered prosthetic. It looked like it was made out of black plastic and black titanium, so it didn't shine, and if you glance at it just right, you would have thought his entire arm had some kind of glove. But lights shined between the joints where his ulna and radius bones should have been. Troublemaker looked like he earned his name well. He had numerous piercings on his ears and one on his nose. He also had some tattoos of notes and troubles on his skin, along with some symbols, letters, something I couldn't identify. He smiled back at me and offered his right hand to shake. Hi there. I am Troublemaker. I'm a troublemaker, he said as his tattoos on his face shifted again to make new designs and symbols, but leaving the notes and trouble where it should have been. Shaking his hand, I couldn't help but stare at the moving tattoos on his face. He saw me staring and let out a small chuckle. Oh, my tattoos? They're made of shifting script. The language of magic. The language, when written down, allows the caster to use magic. My shifting script on my skin allows me to enhance my strength, healing, reflexes, and resistance to sound. It also gives me some ability to shift and amplify audio energy, which means we don't need speakers, but I can also shift frequency and direction of sound to shatter or carve walls, or create infrasound to make people feel nervous or even unsafe. That thing, though, is although I can modify existing sounds with my magic, I can't actually use magic to create new sounds. This is where both my bass and Mach V singing come in handy, he said, patting her on the back. Mach V looked up at him, and he ducked in to give her a kiss, before she turned to me and began to speak again.
Yeah, my name is Mach V because I can create powerful sounds up to an equivalent of a Mach V sonic boom. It also makes me the lead vocals because I don't actually need a microphone to be heard in the back. Thing is, although I can get loud easily, I actually cannot control my voice any better than a typical singer. So while I can generate sound, Troublemaker can shape it into more useful things.
She finished, before pulling out a file and opening it as she began to ask questions and take notes.
So, Rosen, do you have any special abilities, superpowers, esoteric skills, unusual items, or paranormal allies that you think will assist with employment?
Well, I have the ability to either shut down or fry an electronics I come in contact with. I have to be touching the electronics or a component of the device to do so, but as long as it is still connected to the electronic device. My ability is an activated one, so I have to want to use it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to answer any phone more complicated than a string in a tin can. That brought some laughs from the team, and even from the hostess who was looking at us from the podium. I looked back at her, and then I realized I haven't met Shaker yet. Maybe she's late, or maybe she's invisible. never really know. The only big drawback to my ability is it affects all electronics I am touching, or if it's touching conductive material I'm touching. So I keep my phone in a rubber casing just in case, but it usually doesn't matter with it in my pocket. It has come in handy a few times. I smiled to myself, thinking back to the hellish angel Angelo. However, I don't go around advertising that ability because it's not all that useful compared to, say, generating sonic booms, controlling sounds, or whatever Esclepsius can do. I don't think anyone explained that to me. I finished now realizing that they were a bit of a mystery to me.
Well, Esclepsius can heal anyone they can see. That's why they wear goggles, so their eyesight isn't obscured. But honestly, your power sounds impressive as is, and not every ability needs to be big and showy to be useful. I knew someone who had the ability to telekinetically move anything they could touch. Didn't seem very useful until she became a locksmith. Then she could use her powers to open any lock and also build locks with greater precision. Although she did become a big name in her circles, she isn't a flashy hero, and doesn't make her any less of a success. So your power isn't inherently a good or bad one. It is who holds it and how they use it.
Mach 5 said, writing down some things in her file.
So, do you have any previous experience working in social media or working with people in general? Customer service, human resources, public speaking, or any similar professions? If not, that is fine, but we just want you to be... If not, that's fine, but we want to be sure you have had experience dealing with people.
She asked her second question, recovering quickly from her slip of a tongue. I think for a moment, remembering to pause to think before I speak. Well, I used to work in a coffee shop up in River City, Canceled Coffee. I did that for a few years, but then I moved here to Garden City to finish up Adulting 101 and to wrap up my Bachelor's of Arts in the Humanities. So I'm used to working with and around people. I use some social media myself, but I haven't specifically worked in social media before. But I would oftentimes write the jokes or trivia of the day in the coffee shop. I'm not sure if that counts towards the social media experience you want, but it was definitely social, and technically, it was a media. I'd say, trying to go for another smile. She certainly smiled back and went back to her file.
Okay, that answered my question, so on to my next question. If we want to set up to do a surprise show in a park that is across the street from the mayor's unveiling of a new bank, what would be the things you would research before the actual unveiling so we can set up the surprise show in such a way it disrupts the unveiling without causing any harm to any of the people at the unveiling?
She asks me specifically. The question was clearly a hypothetical, but one that would check my ability to think on my feet, and also plan for as many variables as possible. Well, first I would go with the basic news on the unveiling. A lot of the time, Villain Watch will explain possible risks and places of attack that's a good list of do's and don'ts. Also, I would try to visit the site if at all possible, and if not possible, I would at least look at the most recent satellite pictures. But if neither of those things are possible, knowing the streets would be useful. I would also examine the street maps, find the best routes for escape, and which ones are the most likely to be blocked. I would also make sure that the people who can escape, who want to escape. I would also try to make sure there's a warning at least 10 minutes beforehand, but at a random interval. I would try to travel as light and, if impossible, disguise. While getting to the park, I would make sure everyone who could set up and then play their songs. I would try to set up a means of quick escape. The band wouldn't need to play very long to interrupt the mayor. Just a few minutes can shut down the unveiling all day. But at that point, our safety is more important than actually messing with the mayor. I finished my statement, and I realized everyone is looking at me, including the hostess. Now my cheeks were burning red. I looked down, trying to hide my face. I must have overthought it, and it wasn't an easy solution. They probably just wanted to hear scout the area and play a song.
I had too many steps, and clearly it wasn't a catch-all plan. There were multiple gaps and holes that could be exploited, and already saying it, I could think of so many different ways to do better. Mach 5 simply wrote down my answer, then looked at the others, and seemed to exchange a thought with them. Writing down what she brought up another question for me.
So, if you work for us, occasionally we may have to ask you to stay late, or you may be on call. We will do our best not to call you during the night or unexpected times, but sometimes there will be times you will be on call or asked to stay late. However, on average, we ask that you work an average of 24 hours a week or 3.5 hours a week during a 7-day work week or 6 hours a day for 4 days a week. We will sometimes ask you to stay later than usual, usually an hour or two, or we will call you for some support and help with research. Anytime you are asked to stay late or you are on call, we will compensate you overtime pay and vacation time. Starting vacation time is 24 hours, and starting sick pay is 24 hours. Both are usable after 30 days. Would that be acceptable for you to occasionally work overtime?
She asked me, looking up from her paper having read the whole disclaimer. I was a bit confused. Normally, wasn't this question what you got after you got hired? Still, it did seem beneficial, but I still had a few questions. One of the things taught to me in Adulting 101 is to ask questions during the interview, even if it seems like a question isn't needed. You're supposed to appear engaged, but also actually be engaged. Plus, it was always good to have clarity, especially since they seemed so genuinely interested in hiring me. Yes, that seems acceptable, but what about paid holidays? Do we get paid holidays? Or do we regularly work on holidays? I asked, the question burning at my mind. Back at Cancelled Coffee, we would be expected to not just work on holidays, but the few holidays we didn't work, we weren't paid. According to the manager, we worked to get paid, and if there was no work, then there was no pay. He wasn't a very kind man, and he would try to find ways to pay us the least he possibly could. And then even less than that.
Well, the band Mach 5 generally do things on holidays. You personally won't be called in on holidays nor the day after, but if a holiday falls on what would typically be a workday, then yes, you would get paid holiday. Generally speaking, if it is an imperial holiday, it counts as a work holiday, with the exception of Columbus Day. If there are religious holidays that prevent you from working, they should be communicated in advance, but 99% of the time, they will also count as a paid holiday. Good question, by the way. A lot of people don't ask for that.
She finished with another smile. Well, since you're all certified villains, what do the mortality and turnover rates look like for this position? I asked my final big question. A question that would make or break working for them. Too high a mortality rate, and it would not be a job I would want to risk, and a high turnover rate would show that the job was stressful, and likely too stressful to work in for very long. Mach 5 nodded and pulled out another paper and placed it in front of me. There were charts of numbers, years, dates, and percentages. It took a few minutes, but then I started to understand. You've all been active for 5 years. In that time, you've had one person previously work in my position, and they retired to go become a firefighter in the Northern Forest. That is how you have a mortality rate of 0. However, since he worked more than 3 months, it confuses the turnover rate, making it appear to be 5%, according to how the ways the turnover rate is measured by recording every 3 months. Okay, I see. So you're looking for his replacement. I looked back up on the paper and handed it back to her. Smiling, she took the paper and placed it into the bag. The others nodded, including the hostess. Shaking my head and confused, I then decided to ask the question that was buzzing around in my skull. It kept coming around, and I kept forgetting about it, just as I thought about it. The question was, who was the hostess, and why was she so interested in what was going on during the interview? Wait, did I already ask that question? Did I already get an answer? Wouldn't it be rude to ask? Wait, those thoughts weren't mine. When did I ever care if asking was rude? I normally just ask for clarity, and when people get offended for clarification, that was normally something on them, not me. Hey, I should ask, why is the hostess so interested in my interview? I mean, you all seem nice, don't get me wrong, but I don't know who you are or why you're so interested in me, I said, immediately feeling bad. Somehow, it felt embarrassing to question her presence here. The hostess then smiled, and so did Mach 5. Mach 5 tilted her head and then whispered to me.
What hostess? Can you try to describe her for me?
She said. She looked like she was laughing at an inside joke that I was just on the verge of understanding. I opened my mouth ready to describe the woman sitting right next to her. Instead, my mind felt like it was full of fuzzy static. I could look at the hostess sitting right next to Mach 5, but as soon as I looked back to describe the hostess, I already forgot what she looked like. So, forgetting that method, I took out a pen and paper and I looked at the hostess, writing down her features as I saw them, careful not to break eye contact and then forget what I was doing. When I felt like I had enough, I looked down on the paper and began to read back what I wrote. But that thing didn't feel right. Like my description of her couldn't be correct. I was sure I was wrong somewhere, but I didn't know where. But I couldn't even remember precisely what she looked like, so there was no way for me to even verify if she was correct. The hostess has black straight hair. It is down to her shoulders. She has bangs that are dyed purple. She has a blue denim news cap, some stickers around her face, some fingerless leather gloves, a black t-shirt with a red rose on it, a blue bandana covering her mouth, and on her name tag is just a skull and crossbones. But that doesn't make sense. But every time I look away from her, I just forget what she looks like. But she's right next to you, and she's been listening into this conversation this whole time. I finish, my mind continuing its fuzzy static. The hostess and Mach 5 look at each other before laughing. Then the fuzzy static in my head cleared, and I could see the hostess and clearly remember her. She indeed had dark hair and a blue news cap. She also had a skull and crossbones on her name tag instead of an actual name. But just a moment ago, I couldn't remember her, and nothing about her stood out. Now I could see she was a very distinct person. And now more things were beginning to fall into place. I realized how odd it was for a bar to have a hostess, and that her hostess stand was nothing more than just a bar stool she was sitting on. Wow, a lot of people wouldn't have noticed me here at all. The most who would have wouldn't have thought to write down what they saw while they were seeing me. So, good job figuring that out. My name is Shaker. I'm the drummer of Mach 5, and arguably one of the most powerful here. I have the ability to essentially blend into any situation or group. People looking at me don't see me as unusual, and any action I take will be seen as normal and expected action, even by machines. For example, I can walk right up to a bank vault surrounded by hundreds of guards and just take as much as I want and walk right out. The guards would get out of my way, no problem. Afterwards, the guards would notice the missing cash, but none of them would even remember me robbing it. They may have vague memories of a bank employee or their superior officer or anyone else, really, who was allowed access to the vault. Investigating camera would see me, but everyone watching it wouldn't notice anything strange about me being there. It gets really, really cool, though, when we start dealing with automated systems. No automated or semi-automated system will see anything I do as strange. Electronic locks open for me regardless of whether or not I know the passcode or if my biometrics are in the system. Computers locked with passwords allow me in. That doesn't mean I can log into any account unless I know the username already. So, lucky for me, a lot of people just use admin as their admin username. She shrugged and then flipped her name tag around, and on the other side of the skull and crossbones was the name Shaker. So, this was the drummer for the band.
Great job on the interview. So, I think I speak for all of us when I say we think you would be perfect for this job. So, do you think you can start on Monday? Your first payment would be Friday.
Mach 5 said, reaching across to take my hand. After a moment, I shake her hand, and my head felt fuzzy again. When it finally cleared, I realized that Mach 5 and all her bandmates all disappeared. Feeling something papery in my hand, I look into it. I see a number, and I also see an address for the business district of town. Just another office building among many. Smiling to myself, I brushed a strand of my purple hair out of my eyes and got up to head home and to get ready for my brand new job. Thank you for listening, and that was my partner Luna helping record for Mach 5. Thank you, and you have a good rest of your night.